The president of NASCAR says that 80% of fans like the high downforce, low horsepower rules package, and the TV ratings for Wednesday night's Martinsville Nights race are in. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. I'm excited this morning because all weekend long there's a lot of great racing happening at Homestead Miami Speedway. Dale Earnhardt Jr. returns to race in the Xfinity Series race later today, so I'm excited for that. But before all the great racing action happens this weekend, we have a few stories to catch up on from the last day or so. So let's just jump right into this thing. So Wednesday night was a historic night. It was the first ever Martinsville night race. Not only that, but because of the pandemic and NASCAR having to shuffle the schedule around, this race was also a midweek race. And it was the first midweek race so far of 2020 to not face any obstacles regarding weather or scheduling. The other two midweek races this year both faced weather delays, and one was actually postponed a full 24 hours to the next day. But Wednesday night's Martinsville race went off without a hitch, and the TV ratings are in. And unfortunately, they are not so flattering. Despite NASCAR being in all the headlines the hours leading up to Wednesday night's race at Martinsville drew in an estimated 1.71 million viewers on FS1. That's more than the 1.5 million viewers that Charlotte, the postponed Thursday night race a couple weeks ago, got, but that is less than the roughly 2 million viewers that the first midweek race, Darlington, a few weeks back, that one received. 1.7 million viewers for a primetime Wednesday night NASCAR race, the first night race in Martinsville Speedway NASCAR history, is a relatively disappointing number. A number that I think pretty much ends the argument in favor of midweek races going forward. I enjoy the midweek races. I've been saying it all along that I'd love to see 2021 or 2022 NASCAR add a couple midweek races, especially during the summer in select markets. I think that would be a lot of fun from a fan at home viewing, but I also said that the TV numbers that we would see for these kind of experimental midweek races would likely dictate that decision. And unfortunately, now 3 midweek races in, granted 2 of them were interrupted by weather, but 3 midweek races in and the ratings are just not there, guys. They are not there. Wednesday night's race ran as scheduled at one of NASCAR's most popular short tracks, a night race, a historic race that had that great promo video beforehand with the flickering lights and everything. NASCAR was the most talked about thing in the United States of America all day leading up to the race. And I'm sorry, but 1.7 million viewers, if I compared that to the entirety of the 2019 season, every race that was run as scheduled in 2019, if the Martinsville night race had happened in 2019, it would have been the least watched Cup Series race of the entire season. That's not counting the few races that got postponed and things like that. But of all the races that were run as scheduled, Wednesday night's race would have been less than every race in 2019, and that, in my opinion, just ends the argument in favor of midweek races. It'd be cool to see one day, but it's not going to happen anytime soon with those types of numbers, because if you're only going to get 1.7 million viewers on cable for a midweek race, why run a race on a Wednesday or Thursday when now the data suggests you will definitely get more viewers if you run it on Sunday? Like, what's the point of changing it up? It's a worthy experiment, and we will still see a couple more midweek races here over the summer, so we'll get some more data to judge. Maybe viewership will boost suddenly and dramatically, and this video will become irrelevant, but 3 races in and 3 not so exciting numbers. It's just not great. One of the main reasons to do midweek races in the first place was to hopefully get a boost from the TV numbers. Because as far as in-person attendance goes for midweek races, I think it's safe to say attendance will be down. Because if you're running a one-day show on a Wednesday night, people work. Kids are in school more often than not. And so chances are, if you're running a race on a Wednesday, the only people going to the track are probably people that live in the immediate area. You're not going to have people traveling from out of state or miles away to come visit that race and attend that race if it's on a Wednesday. Same thing goes for things like camping, which is a huge revenue stream for many racetracks, many weekends. People will come in and camp throughout the entire weekend because they only have to take off maybe a day of work. But if it's a one-day show in the middle of the week, not as many people are going to go camp out for just one night and still have to take off work possibly. Another obstacle is weather. What if a Wednesday night race gets rained out? Can they run it on Thursday? Because a lot of the teams might have to be in another state by Saturday for practice or qualifying. Logistically, midweek races do have a lot of hurdles that they would need to clear to be successful. Obviously, if the race had been run on Fox instead of FS1, it would have got more viewers, but at that point still, why not run the race on Fox on Sunday when now it seems proven that weekend races get better ratings than weekday races? That seems proven at this point, and it is a little bit disappointing because I liked the idea of midweek races, shaking things up, maybe allowing NASCAR to condense the season schedule in the future, still have the same number of races, but maybe get done a month earlier if they're able to fit in some midweek or some doubleheader races. I love the experiment, I love the idea, but right now, the TV numbers do not support midweek races in 2021 or beyond, but I'm not NASCAR. They might still find a way to make it happen. They might still find a way to make it work. But right now, the numbers do not support it heavily. Anyway, let's talk about some more positive news from the last 24 hours. Yesterday, there was a report, again from Adam Stern, Sports Business Journal, a report that Richard Petty Motorsports is getting interest from new sponsors. Andrew Murstein, the majority owner of Richard Petty Motorsports, says that the team is getting a ton of interest in sponsorship from all of this exposure around Bubba Wallace. This reportedly includes from Fortune 500 companies. Obviously, Bubba Wallace has been one of the most outspoken drivers in recent days, in recent weeks. He has gotten a lot of media coverage, not just from the traditional NASCAR media, but from other media sources as well. He has been getting a lot of attention and has really become the face of NASCAR over these last several days. He was the one earlier in the week who publicly called for NASCAR to ban the Confederate flag at races, and just a couple days later, NASCAR actually adhered to that request. Bubba Wallace has gotten attention from the paint scheme he ran at Martinsville. He's gotten attention from other major athletes like LeBron James. So the fact that there would be businesses now interested in sponsoring Bubba Wallace is not surprising at all, and it's a really good thing to hear, in my opinion. Because if you will remember, about a year ago, there was a very real question about whether or not Richard Petty Motorsports would survive past 2019. It was a rumor, but it was a heavily talked about rumor at the time. They were significantly helped out in the middle of last season when Worldwide Technology began funding their program in a major way, and that has likely carried over into this year some as well. Reportedly, Richard Petty Motorsports actually bought some new race cars before the start of the 2020 season, and it shows up in their performance this year. Their statistics in 2020 are significantly better than either of the last couple of years. In both 2018 and 2019, Bubba Wallace finished 28th at the end of the season in points. Right now, through the first third of 2020, he is 20th in points, a +8 gain. And this year, his average finish is 20.1 compared to last year's average finish of 23.9, nearly 4 positions better this year. And he already has more top 10s this year than he did all of last season. So clearly, the performance has been improved by the entire 43 team and organization. And so if they do get some additional funding from all this extra publicity, extra press that they've been receiving recently, I think that's good news. It's Richard Petty Motorsports, the king. A team that a year ago was facing serious financial questions, serious performance questions, now finds themselves perhaps on a path towards being competitive. I think it's great for Bubba Wallace, a very big and bold personality, whether you like him or not, whether you like everything he stands up for or not. He is a big, bold, polarizing personality, which is what a sport like NASCAR desperately needs more of. And he drives the iconic Richard Petty style 43 for Richard Petty himself, for the king. He still goes to the racetrack almost every week. If that team is getting some additional funding and some additional attention because of all this press and publicity, that is good news in my opinion. We want more competitive race teams. We want the 43 to be running up front again and more consistently. I don't see this as a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. It's more sponsors in NASCAR supporting one of its most historic, team owners and drivers, one of its most popular drivers today. I think this is great news all around. So that was cool to see coming out yesterday. We'll see what sponsors actually do end up on the car or how this ultimately unfolds, but that is good news for that entire race team. Much needed good news, I would say, given how the last year or two have gone. All right, so we've touched on maybe some bad news, some good news, I would say. Now we have some just annoying news, if you ask me. So yesterday, it was reported that NASCAR president Steve Phelps on Michael Waltrip's podcast said that 80% of fans are in favor of the low horsepower, high downforce rules package that debuted in 2019 and is still being run at intermediate tracks this year in 2020. 80%, that is a pretty considerable majority, and it's unclear where Steve Phelps is getting this information. I know social media isn't always indicative of the full story, but I know on social media at least, fans are still very divided on the current intermediate rules package, and I would say most people are more negative than positive on the general idea of less horsepower and more downforce, i.e. more big spoiler. So for him to throw around a number like 80% without providing any evidence or research or anything like that was a little bit shocking. So where is Steve Phelps getting this 80% number from? That's a big number. Where is this coming from? Well, it seems likely to me that Phelps is getting this number from NASCAR's highly problematic Fan Council survey. And I say highly problematic because this survey is clearly biased, is clearly confused, and we're going to look at some of the questions in a moment. I can't remember if I've shown the questions or talked about this much on the show in the past, but many of the questions are just useless. They all lack important context. The Fan Council survey is a disaster, but let's look at some of these questions and you'll see how big of a disaster and how pointed and slanted these questions are. These are some of the questions that were sent out to the Fan Council, which From what I can tell, it's just a random assortment of fans that somehow ended up on like an email list, I guess. And these questions were first published to the public several months ago, so that's why I can't remember if we talked about it on the show at the time, but in case we didn't, we're going to talk about some of these now and look at some of these questions. But here we are, this section right here. For each of the following pairs, please select the option that would be more exciting to you. Less side-by-side racing with more horsepower, or more side-by-side racing with less horsepower. Those are the only two options on this list that, again, this is what I'm saying, lacks all important context. Because obviously most people want more side-by-side racing, but why can't we have more side-by-side racing with more horsepower or even medium horsepower? Like, why is that the only two options? Why are those the only two possibilities that you have here? Again, clearly slanted in this case to make people pick the low horsepower option, which would easily add to Steve Phelps's 80% number. I mean, that's probably what he's basing it off of, is this one question right here. Because almost every NASCAR fan I've ever talked to wants more side-by-side racing, but if these are the only two options you're giving people, it's gonna make the data look like everyone is in favor of less horsepower when that is not necessarily the case. Some of these other questions are just as bad, if not worse. Here's another one. Which sounds more exciting to you? Drivers performing based on their equipment or drivers performing based on their skill? I don't really know what useful information NASCAR is going to gather from a question like that, but so be it. These next two are even worse. Which is more exciting? A close finish or close racing throughout the race? Why are the two mutually exclusive in this case? This one just doesn't make any sense. I mean, most people like me want both. I'd like close racing throughout the race, but typically wouldn't close racing throughout the race lead to a close finish? Like, why would close racing throughout a race suddenly turn into the leader being way ahead at the very end? That doesn't make any sense. And again, what information is NASCAR gaining from this poll, from this question? Like, what if 100% of people say that they'd rather have a close finish than close racing? What does NASCAR do with that information? Like, what good is having that information now? I don't know. This whole survey is stupid. Here's another question. Which is more exciting? Driver winning by a lot or driver winning by a little? Again, I'll bet you 90% of people said driver winning by a little. Everybody loves photo finishes. That's what people go back and replay and talk about for months ago. But again, this is just a stupid question. What can NASCAR possibly do with that information? Like, what could that be possibly used for? I don't know. It's just really stupid. But going back to Steve Phelps making the comment that 80% of fans like low horsepower, high downforce, it all goes back to that survey, in my opinion, specifically that first question we looked at, which, as we noted there, was really biased and provided fans with little to no context and little to no alternative options, which I think if NASCAR had presented alternative options on that question, most fans would have chosen the alternative answers. It's just a really dumb survey. It doesn't make NASCAR look good. Now, I do have a lot of respect for Steve Phelps. I think he has done a very good job. He's been one of the most transparent leaders in NASCAR history. A stark contrast from the Brian France era. Now, Steve Phelps is not the CEO, he is just the president, but he has done a very good job, in my opinion, over the last couple of years of being transparent with the fan base and holding press conferences and really sharing kind of where the sport is at and where he thinks the sport is going and where NASCAR as a whole is kind of angling themselves. So I do appreciate Steve Phelps being as open as he has been. I don't really appreciate this comment though, because like I said, I think the data is not there. I think the data he is looking at is horribly skewed and is not useful in any significant way. Now, you guys all know my opinion on the current rules package. I love what NASCAR has done this year by separating the short track and road courses from the 1.5 and 2 mile racetracks. They chopped the spoiler down, kept the 750 horsepower at the short tracks, and it makes the short tracks great. It's what we knew all along needed to be done at the short tracks, and NASCAR is finally able to convince the teams to go along with it, and that's why we have a great short track package this year. That's why Phoenix earlier this year was really good. That's why Bristol was really good. That's why Martinsville the other night was a pretty darn good race. In 2018, with high horsepower, low downforce, the small spoiler in 2018, the intermediate tracks by and large sucked. Chicagoland was an anomaly, but beyond Chicagoland, which is a very unique racetrack in and itself, most of the 1.5 miles in 2018 were very boring races, which is ultimately what led to the current rules package we have at those tracks. I still think the current high downforce package works to some extent at a good number of the intermediate tracks. Not at every intermediate track. Not every intermediate track got better with this package. I would say Homestead, for example, that we're going to this weekend, did not need the change. I think the high downforce package has produced similar racing to the low downforce package. But that being said, I do not believe the high downforce package is the be-all end-all for the future of NASCAR. I think with the next gen car, they're clearly taking a lot of the issues with the Gen 6 and with the high downforce package. They're taking a lot of those issues into consideration. NASCAR has a long-term plan, and it does not look like 900 horsepower is ever coming back, at least not anytime soon. But I think NASCAR has heard a lot of the concerns with the high downforce rules package over the last year and a half and is making an effort to address them and hopefully improve on those missteps with the next gen car, which of course, unfortunately, we won't see until until 2022. But I do think NASCAR deserves credit for the changes they've been willing to make. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below about everything that was talked about in this episode today. We covered a lot of bases. I am wore out. Thank you all for watching this episode. Subscribe if you are new. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. We've got new t-shirts down below near the description. Go check those out. Several designs available. Represent the show wherever you go. I appreciate it. Of course, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters as well. Thank you all a ton for your continued support. Hopefully we're able to get back to the racetrack sooner rather than later, and I can go back to covering races the way that I typically do. So I greatly appreciate your support. Your support helps make that possible and helps me continue to upload videos almost daily on this channel. Would not be possible without the support I get from you all on Patreon. Enjoy the racing the next couple days. Dale Jr. races later tonight, Cup races tomorrow. We got 2 Xfinity races, a truck race today as well. There's a lot of racing happening over the next 24, 36 hours or so. So enjoy it, because I certainly will. I'll see you guys again Sunday after the Cup race. Should be fun. Take care, y'all.